Okay. This is the episode where I share with you all of my secrets. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Beyond Balance, and I am Catherine Zach. Before we get into all of my best secrets, which I promise are coming, I have a confession to make. This episode was nearly impossible for me to write. I kept putting it off for weeks. I would collect notes and notes and notes. I'd put them in my phone. I'd write them on pieces of paper. I'd have them in all my notebooks. I'd type them up in like 6 different Google Docs on my computer. I'd read about it. I'd meditate on it. I'd talk to myself out loud in the car about it. Which, pro tip, if you'd like to start a podcast, start in your car just by talking out loud to yourself, or actually, probably better yet, if you're trying to figure out something important to you, if you're trying to figure out what is actually on your mind about something, talk to yourself out loud in the car about it. So I'm thinking about this episode all the time, prepping, and then always procrastinating, always finding a million chores to do, some other bit of client work to do, just anything to not sit down and actually write the draft for this episode, and certainly not to record it. Because my confession is this episode is all about setting better boundaries and also gauging our relationship to where we are in terms of the burnout scale. And quite frankly, the confession is that I am in a major boundary resetting moment in my own life. And I am also kind of very carefully monitoring my own burnout gauge at the moment. So in other words, it was hard for me to do this episode because it's hard to do this work of setting better boundaries and avoiding burnout or recovering from burnout. And I myself am very much in the process of doing this work. And here's the thing is, we're never not doing this work, because really this work is what we think about when we hear the word balance in the first place. It's like the living answer to the questions of how do all the pieces of my life fit together? Or all of these roles and jobs and responsibilities that I have feel like they all take so much time. They all take so much energy. They all take so much of me. They feel like they're in competition. How is there so much to do and there's only 24 hours in a day? And even quite simply the question of like, how is this all going to work out? Right? These are the questions that we're asking ourselves every day, because this boundary setting, burnout avoidance work is not just theoretical. It's not. It's actually the lived experience of composing our lives. And that's really what I've come to. It's really what I've been working on with this whole Beyond Balance body of work, is coming to a more elegant and elevated version of these questions. And I keep inviting myself to ask this question. So I'm going to invite you to ask it as well. And it's one I use with my clients too, is instead of feeling like there's all these balls in the air and how can we possibly keep them, in the air at all times, the question that actually feels energizing, inspiring, and elevating to ask is this: how do I compose a meaningful life where I feel like I can show up as my whole self every day? I'll say it again, because that's the question at the heart of this Beyond Balance work is, how do I compose a life of meaning, a meaningful life where I feel like I can show up as my whole self every day? So that's the question I'm asking. And that's the question that's at the heart of this boundaries and burnout episode. And it's the one that we're all always answering just by living our lives each day, right? So of course, we're always asking this question, but at sometimes we don't feel it as much, right? Because things are actually flowing. Like maybe there's been a bunch of consistency and, kind of regularity in your schedule or your family life or your work life or where you live. And you're kind of in a flow, like you're grooving, you're grooving a little bit. And so you're not noticing this question at all times. But then there are, of course, other times in our life where we're just in the midst of big transformation and transition, or we've been like whomped over the head by some change that crashes down out of nowhere. And so this question, we can really feel like we can really feel that we're asking it every day and that we're trying to compose our lives in a way that can help us answer it. And for me, this is really one of those moments of feeling it. I had my second child now almost 6 months ago. I don't know where that time has gone, but still definitely feel like we're in the new phases, adjusting to being a family of four. I'm still not, none of us are still sleeping yet through the night. Coming back to my work now in a kind of bigger way, now that the baby is in daycare, and also still, I think, kind of reconfiguring a lot of things that shifted in March of 2020, even though now we find ourselves 2 years later. So again, it's a moment where I feel that question. It's a moment where I'm really renegotiating some important boundaries in my life. And I'm on a daily basis looking at my tank of energy reserves, my own personal tank of energy reserves, to make sure that I'm like well on the right side of not burning out, because it's easy to kind of get close to that line with all I'm putting out right now to my family, to my work. So all to say, I'm feeling it. And if you're feeling it, we're in good company together. If you're struggling with this presently, I see you, I feel you. What finally helped me sit down and write this episode, what finally helped me sit down and record this episode, was just to admit that that I'm like in a moment, right, of struggling with it myself. And I always have to be honest with you. I mean, that is how I embody this work that I teach and share. And if I am not doing it myself, I can't invite you to do it too. So I just had to get very honest about that and say, like, hello, this is difficult too for me. And then, of course, I had to unlock that and kind of unblock that for myself and get through to the other side of it and synthesize it in a way that I could share with you. And so that's the other secret I'm going to share this episode, is that I'm going to give you the tool that I used most recently to renegotiate my own boundaries and to really solidify that I'm on the right side of not burning out. So, yes, all of my secrets today. But first, it was a long intro. First, let's sit together. Let's breathe together, because all of this comes back to me creating a space for us together to just be, right? To just simply be. And you can call it meditation if you'd like to practice this moment of meditation here in each episode of the podcast, because meditation is at its simplest pausing and paying attention on purpose to the present moment, and in the present moment without the filter, right? Without the story, without the judgment. No good, bad, right or wrong, success or failure. Just simply being with whatever it is that we find in our lives at this moment. So, if you are not yet in a comfortable place, like physically, literally, see if you can get yourself there. You might even consider like changing locations, pressing pause for a moment to get yourself into a better place, a real place. You might close your door. You might close your computer screen. At the very least, you can close your eyes if that feels safe. Otherwise, just soften your gaze and soften the eyes, take the gaze down so that it's like you're looking through the curtains of your eyelashes so that you take in a little less of what's happening around you. It's like a literal boundary you just created, you just embodied by simply closing your eyes. And in this way, too, you can start to draw the attention inward and see what are the closest sounds you can hear. Perhaps it's the noise right outside of your window, birds, sirens, the wind. Perhaps it's the sounds you can hear in the room you're in right now. The creak of your chair or the floor, the hum of your computer. And even especially, see if you can start to listen to the sound of your own breath. Go ahead and let your attention home in right there. Let it wrap around your breath. Let your attention wrap around your breath. This breath. And this breath. And this breath too. Can you listen for the sound of the rise of your next breath in and the sound of the fall of your next breath out? And just a few moments like this to see if you can keep all of your attention, all of your focus on the sound of your breath. And every time your mind wanders away, when it does, see if you can gently call your attention back to the sound of your own breath. And in this way, in this practice, you create for yourself a steady internal compass, a reference point, a sound, a place to come back to, a part of yourself to return to, a way to remember yourself back to yourself by simply listening for the sound of your own breath, so that every inhalation can become an invitation to reset your focus, to return your attention, to come back to yourself. This breath that is always with you, a steady center point, within yourself. A few more moments, a few more rounds of breath, just like this. Okay. You can start to slowly expand your awareness beyond your breath, back to the edges of your body, the surface of your skin, and the tips of your fingers, the tips of your toes. You can wiggle your fingers, you can wiggle your toes, you can stretch and move in all the ways you know so well, in all the ways that feel good, like you were just waking yourself up for the first time today. Take a few moments for that. Let it feel good. Okay. So that's the whole episode, right? That's the whole secret. Create a steady reference point in yourself to return to use as a compass. It can be as simple as your breath. This breath that you're already breathing right now, just practice your breathing and you're good to go. You'll figure it all out. All those boundaries. Avoid that burnout. Belong to your life. Practice that and call me in a month. No, 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 no. You'd want your money back if that was it. But really, it is that simple. I mean, if there is like one thing you take away from any of this is just that ability to pause and use and count on this tool that you possess right now because you are alive. You know, it's better than an app on your phone. It's better than this podcast, the sound of your own breath, right? As this constant, reliable, consistent, yet ever fluctuating reminder of who you are, of what you are, that you are here. Right. So, if you practice, you know, if you take one thing away, 5 minutes of breathing every single day, that actually is the secret. Avoiding burnout, creating and communicating good boundaries, composing a life of meaning where you feel like you belong and you can show up as your whole self. All of that requires that you do what you just did, that you pause and that you create some quiet and that you listen and that you have a constant, steady part of yourself that you can always return to, right? That you can listen to and for yourself, whether it's the sound of your breath or the sound of your own voice. That's where the good stuff comes in. And so much of why burnout is real and setting boundaries is tricky business is because we spend a lot of time doing the opposite, right? Instead of listening for our own internal compass, we listen to everyone else. We take everyone else's input on this, and we can see what that does to our boundaries, and we can see what that does on our burnout scale. And I'm talking about things like, you know, the stories that we inherited from our parents and our teachers and where and how we grew up about how our life should be. And of course, that word, that killer word, should, you know, should is, I think, where all good intentions go to die. It's a breeding ground for guaranteed stress. My sister reminded me the other day in conversation that like should is so grounded, so close to that's phonetic relative shame, right? And it just doesn't make us feel good. And yet we spend so much of our lives operating from a place of should, right? So we spend a lot of time taking this outside input, even just like what we look at on our phone or, you know, what comes across our inbox, all of this stuff. We're so so easily led to listening to rather than sitting quietly and just kind of waiting patiently and listening for the sound of our own voice. Um, and that's why, again, this is tricky business here. That's why we're here together having this conversation, because there's so much noise outside of us that it's really hard to get quiet enough to listen to what is inside of us. And that's why I'll add another B to this episode of burnout and boundaries. And I've already said it a couple of times. And that other B word is belonging, right? The kind of understanding of whether or not you belong to your life, like you belong in your life, like your life belongs to you. The only way to do that, the only way to feel like you belong and to have your life belong to you, is to do this work of setting boundaries and avoiding burnout from the inside out, right? Not the inside, the outside in, the inside out. Really listening to your own breath, your own voice, your own life as you do this good work of setting boundaries and avoiding burnout, right? It's this kind of ever present return to this question of like, do I belong to my life? Does my life belong to me? Okay. So that's why the heart of every one of these episodes, this one especially, is my favorite unsexy promise to make to you. And that is that if you create a daily practice, a daily meditation practice of pausing to listen, to get quiet, to pay attention on purpose, without the filter of judgment or story or good or bad or right or wrong or success or failure. If you do this every day for at least a few minutes, maybe 20, over time, and I'm talking weeks, months, years, you might just find enough space to start to wedge something in between you and your stories, or the way that it always goes, right? And only when we can wedge that little bit of space in between us and our kind of default habituated reaction to things is real change and transformation possible. So again, not a sexy promise. It's a lot of sitting quietly by yourself and listening to do this work. That's kind of at the outset, but that's why we're here doing it together. But that is the way, my dear, to huge transformation, right? Huge transformation. And if we didn't need that, like if what we were already doing was already working, we probably wouldn't still be listening. We wouldn't be having this conversation. So transformation takes, number one, mindset shifts, but they're not enough, but they're necessary. It also takes real action items, right? To see that change actualized in your life. So mindset shifts and real action. And then, of course, this practice piece that ties those two together, some kind of daily, quiet, reflective practice like meditation to check in with yourself and make sure that you're on your own right track with this transformation and change that you're up to notice your own growth. So the mindset shifts that we're working with, I spent all of the second episode of this podcast talking about 3 key mindset shifts for dealing with burnout. We'll start there, but I'll give you the Cliff's Notes version here. And you might want to go back and have a listen or another listen to that episode too. But like the frame of mind that we're working with, the kind of new stories that I'll offer to supplant the ones that are always continuously going in your own head, because I know you have them, I have them too. The first mindset shift that we worked on in that episode is the idea that it really is this hard and you are doing a good job, right? So we come to this work of avoiding burnout or recovering from burnout and setting better boundaries. And we're like, this is so tough. And maybe it's just tough for me. Maybe I'm just bad at this, right? Everyone else on Instagram seems to have it figured out, right? So the mindset shift that I start with, and that I'll offer us all right now is like, no, it really is this hard. and you're doing a good job, right? Like you're like what you're doing, it's good. It's enough, right? We can just kind of meet ourselves in this moment and not wait for that kind of when then thinking of like, well, when I get better at X, Y, and Z, then I'll be able to do this. No, like it's hard and you're doing a good job. And let's just start where we are. So that's the first mindset shift I'll give us at the kind of beginning point of transformation around this topic of burnout and boundaries. And next mindset shift is I love this one. It's this idea, this phrase that like everything is not mine to do. I don't have to do everything. Maybe it's I don't have to do everything right now. Or like I can delegate some of this, right? Or I don't have to accomplish all the things I ever want to do this month, this quarter, this week, today, right? Because we set ourselves up like that a lot. We overload and weigh down our to-do lists and we make our schedule so busy, so back to back to back to back that we're constantly racing from one thing to the next. So just a very grounding and kind of quiet revolutionary mindset shift would be just, it's not all mine to do. I don't have to do it all. And that leads us right into our next and third mindset shift. And it's this, I know it's a bummer maybe, or it feels like freedom. And it's the idea that really you can't have it all, but you can have this, right? This is a lesson I learned from a poem written by a woman named Barbara Ross. And it's such a beautiful one. Like, no, you can't have it all, but you can have this. And this being like your life that is right in front of you right now, right? So not that other person's life or not that kind of future version of yourself when you have it all figured out. It's like, you can't have it all, but you have this, right? This, and it gets us so centered and approaching this question of burnout and boundaries and whether or not I belong to my life in the present tense, in the present sense, so we can meet ourselves in this moment and actually start to be in our lives. So go back to the second episode. There's so much more on each of these mindset shifts and some fun exercises for you to do there too. But I'm going to just borrow those and put them at the kind of meat of the beginning of this episode too. Same mindset shifts we're working with. You're doing a good job. It really is this hard. Everything is not yours to do. And you can't have it all, but you can have this. You can have this that is right in front of you. So mindset shifts we'll begin with. And now the actions, right? The actions that you can start to take to set better boundaries and to feel like you belong to your life and to avoid burnout. And this is where my best secrets come back in, because this is actually what I'm about to give you. This action is what I take my mentorship and my coaching clients through. And it's what I just did myself in my most recent moment of realizing that my boundaries had gone astray and I was hovering dangerously close to burnout. This is what I did myself to get over this kind of recent boundary burnout recovery moment that I was having, and why I was putting this episode off in the first place. So here it is. This is what I did. This is the action that you can take. Carve out some time, might be right after you listen to this episode, might be a day where you can be really spacious and gracious with yourself, at least for some of it. Right. So don't try to do this action. Don't try to do this exercise in the middle of your busiest day or at the end of one of your busiest day where you're just spent and over it. Do it when you have some of your wherewithal still there, right? Like you have some resources to give, you have some time to give to this. You don't have to rush through it. I know, hard to find that, but I believe that you can make it if this is important to you. And I know it is. I know it is. So first thing is just carve out this time that's really spacious and gracious before you do this exercise. And here it is. Here's the secret. Here's what I did. Here's what I do with my people. Here's what we'll do together here. So the exercise you'll take yourself through, the action you will take, what you will ask yourself is this: if I was hiring someone to be me and do the job of my life, what is the job description that I would come up with? If I was hiring someone to be me and do my life, what's the job I would hire them for? Okay. And the framework is very important here. It's not just the doing of the life, right? So, like, if you're a parent, it's not just the making of the lunches and the running of the carpool and the doing of the laundry. It's not just that. It's not just the task mastering of your life. It's not just the box checking of your life. It's not just the keeping of the calendar of your life. This framework of the job description is, what does it take to be you, right? To be in your life, which includes some questions of like, how does it feel to be in my life? Who is the whole self that shows up in my life? That is the kind of what we're getting at when we talk about being in my life. And this way of looking at it, of clarifying boundaries and saving yourself from burnout, is huge, because now you're not just a robot doing your life, right? And forgetting to like plug yourself back in to recharge. This approach leaves room for you, human, whole human being in your life. So perhaps at the top of this job description, you kind of encapsulate it in a header of like the mission statement, the value statement, the vision of this job you've created that is yourself being and doing your life. What's the header at the top of the page for your job description of your life at this moment? And I say at this moment because this is an exercise you can and maybe will want to do once a year or once every couple of years, or when big change kind of like whacks you on the head, or when you are in the midst of kind of long unfolding transformation, right? The good stuff too. You can come back to this exercise again and again and again, because our job description is not stagnant, right? It can and it will change. And hopefully it will change in the direction of our growth, right? Of where we're really growing and how we're unfolding and how and who we are becoming. So go ahead, right? Write out the different roles for your job description. And for me, I'll just give you some insight. So like you can have a tangible example. I came up with 2 roles and it kind of surprised me because the first thing I said was mother. And I really thought that the first thing that would come to me would be more of like my day job, but it was mother. And actually that whole role had 3 hyphens in it. So it was like a very hyphenated role, and it was mother slash wife slash family member, right? That was my whole first role. That was like one role that I filled out this big job description for. And the other role that I came up with is writer, teacher, creator, coach, consultant. So more slashes. And that's this part. Like this is us right now. Podcast host falls under there too. It was very curious, right? Just to see the roles that I came up with in the first instance, and then to start to fill those out. And I had a lot of hyphens in there, so maybe I'm cheating, but I want to say too, like to come back to that mindset shift of everything is not yours to do and you can't have it all. Like there are other roles that I would love to include on there, like ones that kind of make me more of a player and contributing to my like larger community and you know, a friend, a daughter, a sister, all of those. But here's another mindset shift I'll give you as a bonus. In a way of approaching this question of burnout and boundaries. And it's this idea that like, and we do this a lot. We use this phrase, right? Like the bare minimum, like I'm just doing the bare minimum. Right. And when we say it that way, we're always really hard on ourselves and kind of disappointed. Like there's this feeling of lack when we say I'm just doing the bare minimum. But the way I'll flip that script for all of us is to say, no. You're not just doing the bare minimum. You are good at taking care of what is essential. Right. Totally different way of looking at that. And so for me right now, when I lead with that, when I say I'm good at defining and taking care of what is essential, I see that my 2 primary roles right now, like what I have the bandwidth for, to be all in with, is just this role in my family and this role of my work. Those are like the 2 ways that I'm showing up right now. And it doesn't feel like the bare minimum. It feels like I'm taking care of what is essential. So I'll give you that too. So write down your roles and then the responsibilities. right? The roles and responsibilities. What are the responsibilities for these roles? And it's not just the tasks. It can be, it is partially, right? That the tasks, but also like, what does it take to be in these roles? Like for me, when I come back to that mothering role, I think, well, I want to be a present and patient parent. I also want to be kind to my spouse, right? I want to be kind to my person. And so other than like just, again, making the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, what does it actually take for me then to show up in these roles, requiring myself, right, to be present and patient and kind? And that includes some of my responsibilities are to myself, right? Because that's how I can show up being patient and kind and present. So time for self-care, time with my friends, time spent doing work that I love, time outside in nature, time to rest, time to have fun. Like this is actually part of my responsibilities to fulfill this role, because it's not just doing the role, it's how I want to be in the role. Right. So like writing all of that down on the paper too, like all that stuff that we just, think we don't have time for, right? If they're like, I don't know if I have time for this, include it. You need to have it there, right? And then you take your job description and your roles and your responsibilities. And, this took me 2 hours. So you're not going to get it done, I don't think, in the time it takes to listen to this episode. Maybe you will. And then take your job description for you in your life that you just wrote out and either compare it to your current to-do list or your calendar or your agenda or all of the above. Or maybe you start from scratch, which I think I might recommend, and create a new calendar, a new agenda, a new to-do list for this year, for this quarter, for this month, for this week, and for today, right? Based on what you just wrote for the job description of what it takes to be in your life and to do your life. Like if you were to hire someone to be you and do your life, right? This is what it takes. And what I love about this, again, it's an inside out approach. It's you choosing, right? You coming up with this, right? And you have this, you break it down, you compare it to what your life currently looks like. And it doesn't change everything at all overnight. But what it does is it shows you what the space is between where you are right now and where you might really want to be, right? Just gives you kind of like a roadmap, like a distance needed to travel. And then you can start to see what it will take to close the space in between those two places, to kind of close the gap. And I want you to focus on like boiling this job description down, not just in a big sense, but really in kind of a day-to-day way, truly in a day-to-day way, because and these are borrowed words, some of my favorite. It's the writer Annie Dillard, and she says, how we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. Right. So not every day is going to be ideal. Not every day you're going to hit the highest marks on your job description, your roles and responsibilities, but every day can be a true snapshot of that kind of larger vision. And it has to be, because our lives take place on each day. Right. And if each day is so far afield from what we want for our lives, that we're not really living the life that we would choose, right? We don't really belong to our life. We don't really belong in our life. Our life doesn't belong to us. So this daily, everyday part is so crucial. That's why I'm going to come back to my unsexy promise of you meditating every day, just to take the time to get quiet, to pause and to listen and to check in and see, does this day match the roles and responsibilities I've created? If I were to hire someone to be me and do my life, like, does this day line up? Is this person doing a good job? So yes, each day, this present day matters. Whoosh. Okay. That was a lot. I want you to do it. And if you do, I want you to tell me how it went. I want to hear about it. So take the time, carve out the space, be spacious and gracious with yourself, and then write out your own job description and compare it to your current to-do list. Compare it to your current agenda, your current calendar. And remember that like the question we're asking and trying to live our way into is, am I composing a meaningful life where I can show up as my whole self every day? No small potatoes. I know this is a big episode and I really do. I want to hear how it's going for you. So let me know, leave a comment, send this to a friend. You can also visit katherinezack.com/mentorship because I have a form that you can fill out. It's like a mini version of this exercise, and you can answer some of these questions. And if you do, when you do, I will send back to you, like from me to you, a kind of mini consult, right? A mini email consult with one mindset shift that I'd recommend, especially for you. One more action item that you can take that I'll recommend, especially for you, and one practice, right? One practice that you might start to integrate into your daily life to hold each of those pieces together, to hold the mindset shift and the actions together to check in with. I will tailor that for you. It's katherinezack.com/mentorship. You'll find a form there. Fill it out. I got you. Let me know how it goes. More to come. But I think that was just enough for now. So thank you. Thank you for being here. I am Catherine Zack. This is Beyond Balance. This was the episode on boundaries and burnout and belonging to your life. And it was a hard one for me to show up for because I'm doing the work right alongside you. Hope to see you next time. Thanks for listening.